without further ado, let me introduce you to Brian Covey. So Brian is a former pro soccer player. He's the author of Conversations with Covey. He has got a top podcast called The Brian Covey Show. He's the VP of one of the largest mortgage companies in the country. He is a personal branding expert. He's been in Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, and I could go on and on and on. He's an expert team builder and has done an incredible job there. And he's a big influencer. I think about 42,000 LinkedIn followers and about 250 or so thousand Instagram followers. So before we start with Brian, Kathy, get us started.
Inside me, son of a god, I'm like a titan that's rising, oh just you watch. I'm stepping into fate, there is no time to waste. I've got that lightning inside me, this is how legends are made. This is how legends are made.
Welcome, Brian Covey. How are you, my friend?
Well, with that intro, how could I not be phenomenal? I feel like I was going to come on the soccer field again. And like we had our theme music. By the way, that's my youngest, our 7-year-old, one of his favorite songs, one of his pregame songs. So I'm like, it's game time.
We don't mess around, Brian. So Brian and I actually got a chance to catch up yesterday, which was a lot of fun. I have huge admiration for Brian for so many different reasons. And I've got a ton of questions, but they're kind of all over the map. I'm going to start, Brian. You had something that you posted yesterday, and it's a quote. I think it's your quote, but I could be wrong. And it says, everyone has the ability to increase resilience to stress. It requires hard work and dedication, but over time you can equip yourself to handle whatever life throws your way without an adverse reflect on your health. So I think we're in scary times. Everyone's worried about the recession. People are worried about COVID coming back. There's all these things that are stressors. And I thought that was such an interesting quote. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you think you can increase your resilience? Because I think it's such an important part of leading an extraordinary life.
Well, I love this one. And so this has been a journey. I'll take you guys on some of the journey this year. If you've ever done the one word or you've picked something that you really focused on and studied, I'm kind of a nerd. My dad was a pastor and a psychologist, and I enjoyed learning in school, something I still to this day, I love learning and growing. And several months ago, I went through this exercise of figuring out what was some of my uniqueness, what helped me through the dark times and the tough times in my life that like I wanted to quit. I got fired from a job, got cut from the Olympic team, all these things that we've all had. It just may look different for you than what mine is, but you're relatable, right? They were things that didn't go the way we wanted. And I went back in those seasons, Scott, it was, I would bend, but I wouldn't break. And I would think about that for a minute. Like, when's the last time that you were challenged to a point where you thought you were going to break?
Yeah.
And we're all still here. And so we didn't break, right? But we still made it to that next thing. And so a lot of times we think things in our mind are going to be a lot worse than they actually are. And over time, what we realize is it's never really as bad as we thought it was going to be. And then sometimes the good can get better. I really believe that on the other side. So I started studying this one word, resiliency, and started to figure out, what does that look like in athletes? What does that look like in, I call them corporate athletes now, like in business, the people we work with and clients. And resiliency is something our team has really clung on to because we're in real estate and mortgage right now. You guys know, down over 50%. Everything, if you read the news, would tell you that things are completely horrible, right? But the reality is through that, teams are built, I think, through trying times. And so we clung to this word resiliency. That's why I shared that quote, because it resonated with me. And I kind of reworded some things that I felt like not just physical, but mental health, they all matter for today.
Yep. I love it. And I always think of it, adversity is a gift. So it's like working out. It builds a muscle that allows you to withstand whatever life is going to throw at you. And whether, it's COVID or whether it's a bad economy or whatever, there's always that bus that's ready to hit us. And when we, have gone through adversity, we're better equipped for next time. So I love that. I just saw that you had posted it, and I thought it was a good place to start. One of the things, Brian, that you put out a ton of content, and what I love is that it's all really good, actionable content. And I'm sure it's stuff that, probably stems from work you're doing with your team, or just experiences that you're having. But tell me about kind of your journey. When did you decide that kind of personal branding was going to be important to your growth? And then give us, for those people who haven't really thought a lot about personal branding, maybe give us 3 tactical things that people can do to kind of get started on that journey.
Oh, I love that. So I went through about 13 years in corporate America at one of the largest banks at Wells Fargo. And that was really, for me, where I cut my teeth, but I was trained. I learned a lot of things. And on the other side of that training, which was great, was also the suppression of my creativity. I'm a musician. I play bass in our band at church and all this stuff. And like, I wasn't feeling fulfilled on that side. And I realized they would not let you have anything on social. You go back to my LinkedIn, I maybe had a couple thousand connections at that point, and I felt very stifled. Well, then fast forward, I joined a different company that was all about that company brand. And we've all worked there where it was all the company, and they wanted to suppress who I was as an individual and the individual contributions, which I think if you look at any great sports team, right, all the individual athletes have their own personality and flair, how they show up, their talents, what they bring. And I realized on May 5th, I'll never forget this. It's been 6 years now. I got a call from my boss, and he said, "Hey, Brian, we're going to let you go. You're no longer needed with the team. You don't fit in anymore." One, I was blindsided, but two, I was like, "Hey, help me understand." Like I'm kind of in this mode of like shock, but also like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, this is really about the company, and you're talking a lot about your personal journey and your brand and all that. We just feel like that's going to compete with what we're doing as a company." Okay. So I'm kind of digesting this as I go through the conversation. That for me was a pivotal moment of realizing that that isn't where I belong. I'm going to start to build my brand, which I had not done up until that point. I was starting to put like the line in the water a little bit, I like to say, testing it out. And it clearly wasn't a fit for that organization. Okay. Uniquely enough, they actually offered me a job back the next week and said, "Hey, we made a mistake. We want you to come back." And I'm like, this is really strange. But all that to say, that came out of adversity where I did not see that coming. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but man, what a gift that they were able to give me. Less than 10 months later, I leave, I join an organization where I am now. And that does allow me to do the podcast, write the book, share the lessons that are there. And so I share that story with all of you because you probably experienced that on some level where you've been somewhere and you felt stifled, or you wanted your creativity to be, something that you could actually share with people along the journey. You wanted to help other people, right? I mean, that's why we show up. And what I realized is I needed to be in an environment that would let me do that. And so I went and found that, and I created that world that exists now in teaching other people how to do it. So Scott, I share that because, man, I look back, and had that not happened, I would have probably just been, I call it the corporate figurehead robot, going through the motions and doing whatever they asked me to do. And that would have stifled who I am as a father, husband, leader, friend, all of those things. So I'll take you through some tactics because I love those. That's all, kind of, there's the story, kind of what landed and why I started that. So over 5 years now, I went on social and I started to post things, which I think this is where a lot of people get confused on the tactics. I'll give you the 30,000 foot view is document your journey. So Scott, what you reference, a lot of what I share, probably 80%, is truly me just taking something I learned, like what I posted today, you will see, was from a conversation yesterday with a 21-year-old young man that's asking me all these wonderful questions as we're out in Omaha, Nebraska, speaking at an event. And what great questions he asked. And I thought, man, I should capture that. His questions were wonderful about lessons in life, things that I've learned. And there were 4 or 5 of us that were sharing. And so I shared those 3 lessons today because I think those are valuable. That's like from the battlefield, from the streets. So document, don't worry about creating. Because people, they'll fall in love with what your story is, what you're sharing is real, it's relevant, it's what's happening right now. And I share those lessons of what's happened with our team, what's gone well, what's not gone well. What have I learned? What books am I reading? All of that stuff will help you document. The second one for many of you on here, a very strong tactic for me was before I started my podcast, I went on other people's shows. So for most of you, you may not have a podcast, you may have no desire to do it. One of the best ways that you can improve your communication skills, your soft skills, and just how you connect with people. And actually what I found out was I needed to improve my listening. And what a great way to go on a show like a podcast when you are the one leading, asking the questions. So become a guest, share your uniqueness and what value you bring. So that would be number 2. And the third one, Scott, this is my silver bullet, I call it. I started looking at social as a true platform to engage with other people. It is many times more about how you connect up with other people's posts than it is your posts. Building a true community, and what I believe is why we show up on social, is more important for you to engage in their posts. And don't leave the 1 or 2 word comments. Don't leave great job, wonderful post. Actually leave something meaningful and thoughtful. So great example, Scott would post something today about the Legend series. I'm gonna go on there and say, Scott, I'm so excited about this. I can't wait for your guest. And actually, like we were having a conversation. So a quick hack to that, because a lot of people are like, oh, Brian, I don't have time, or how do you find time to comment? Well, there's a button, if you look on all social media platforms, that you can hold down with the microphone. And many times I will speak what I want it to say, because it helps my typos not be as bad either. And I will speak that in, and it's conversational. And so those would be the 3 tactics today. You could go implement, they're all free. And you could actually start really building your brand and building a community.
I love it. I love it. So you're somebody who's made tremendous investments in your personal development. And I sometimes think that people invest more in their annual Starbucks runs than they invest in themselves. And if you believe Warren Buffett, and I do, the best investment you can make is in yourself. And so tell us a little bit about the investments that you make in yourself, and what are your thoughts 2023? I think this is kind of the time of year when people start to think like, what do I need to do different to maybe have to level up in this upcoming year? What are some of the things, what are some of your thoughts around those investments for you in 2023?
I love this question because I struggled with this. I look back on my career in my 20s and my 30s. I didn't invest a lot of money. I would go to the conference and buy the cheapest ticket, right? I would kind of engage with a coach, but I would disengage, and I wasn't serious. I look back and I can be honest about, like, I wasn't really intentional about that. I call it one of those athletes that, like the weekend warrior, like they show up every once in a while, but they're not always there. They're not committed. They're not training in between seasons and what's there. So I'm gonna give you what I learned. This was a really valuable lesson that we teach our team right now. I think it's important for all of us to look back. Is I started to actually study in the last 5 years my biggest seasons of growth. And I call them seasons because being an athlete in soccer, they're seasons. And sometimes they're 3 months, sometimes they're 6 months, sometimes it'll be longer or shorter. But within those 3 or 6 months, I started to look back and where did I invest my time, my money, and my resources? And actually came up with a formula that has helped me now make decisions going forward. And I'm gonna share it with you because I think a lot of us don't know, where should we invest? How much should I invest? And like, really, what's the path? So as I went back in my seasons of growth, 10% of my gross income was invested that month or in those 90-day type of seasons or cycles. 10% of my gross income was invested back in workshops, coaching, personal development, my branding. I have done one-on-one sessions with some people, mentors, actually paid for the day to go sit with them and specifically help me work through a problem. And that's where I noticed that was there. No, it's fascinating. I went back to a couple really big breakthroughs in the last few years for me. I went back and it was closer to 20%. I had doubled down. I didn't even know it as I was going through it. And actually went back and looked at that. And those were very specific parts of my life that I wanted to improve, whether it was my faith, my family, my fitness, the things in my business, diversifying out, opening other companies, and all these things. The return has always been significantly more than I ever expected because I can look back at what's there. And so I tell you right now, my journey is I have an executive coach that I work with. Every Monday we meet and we talk through that. And that's somebody phenomenal that's been in my life for over a year. And then I've got a separate coach that many of you probably know, but more of a mental toughness coach, more of that sports background that kind of helps me through. And it's a coach slash mentor that works with our team and some things there. And I've got both of them that I pay regularly every month to do that. In addition to that, what I have found that's helped me tremendously is I needed to grow my network. You know, we all hear about the piece about your network is your net worth. Well, I didn't realize that till a few years ago. I started to go to these same webinar or events, I should say, that were webinars during COVID, but now they're back in person. And one tip I would give you, upgrade, do the VIP, spend the money, get proximity to the people that you want to be with. And it's usually not the speakers. It's the people that are at the conference with the same motives and intentions as you. They want to grow, they want to learn, they want to do things. And Scott, interesting enough, the last 3 companies and businesses that we started, like in multifamily and some ATMs and all these things with car washes, all these things I never thought I'd be in, were a result of going to a conference, putting myself in the room with people that knew more than I did, willing to engage with me and teach me things I didn't understand. I brought things to the table, but I did not bring what they brought. But that together is what created a great partnership. And so I would say upgrade what's there. And I'll stop because I think we can transition into next year. But does that resonate? You know where I'm going with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
tell us about 2023.
Oh, man, I love this. So I've become somebody that I call it a cheat code, is I've already started on 2023. I'm already in it. I start November 1st. And it's weird for me because it's my wife's birthday. So it's something for me that I can kind of anchor. And so that's the way we start talking about what do we want to accomplish next year? What are our goals? And it's a way for my wife and I to jointly plan that. But I've already started planning out for next year. What conferences am I going to? How much money am I allocating to invest in myself and my brand? Where am I going to strategically spend my time? What's our team going to look like? You know, and even financially on that side, I've already met with our financial planner, tax strategist to plan out next year. And these are some things I used to not do. And I would tell you, if you can get that 60-day head start ahead of other people, the same would be true in your workouts. Like I love fitness. For me is a huge anchor. I was an overweight teenager, probably wouldn't know it, but would wear the 2 shirts to the pool, wouldn't take my shirt off. And so now like fitness is a huge part of my life. So I've already started dialing in where I want to be going into next year, and gaining momentum is the way I think of it. Is that train's going to have momentum going into next year versus if you start January 1, you're starting from a dead stop. You don't want to compete against guys like me and some of these people on the call that if you start early, your momentum is what's going to carry you in, and you're going to have results in Q1 when everybody's like, oh, Q1's slow. Q1 is this. It's not if you start now. So that would be my number 1 hack to get you there. The second thing I did this last year that was unique is I wrote down 3 goals for myself. And one of those was very business focused, right? Like very monetarily focused. I had it all written out. One was more in my personal brand, like we're working on a second book, where the podcast is, some of those things. The third was all around my family and legacy and things that I want to make sure are done around them, the trips we're going to take, the rewards that if I accomplish those are going to reward and fulfill what matters to me, which truthfully is traveling with my kids. Like I would rather go on a trip with my family than go reward myself with something like material with that. Those 3, Scott, would you know this year, the market changed. And so number 1, we're not going to hit that goal. We're not going to hit the goal when I came into 2022. We will not hit that, but we will hit what we readjusted it to. Number 2, blew it out of the water. Number 3 was the one that made me the most happy, is the trips. My wife and I celebrated 20 years. We got to go do things that have meaning and experience. And so if you're able to write those down and have a visual for them, I simplified it in those 3 areas. If it doesn't fit in one of those 3 buckets, I'm not doing it. I'm just saying no, and it's not something that's going to distract me going into next year. So clarity of what success looks like, clarity of where you're going, and I think really just owning the fact that this is your journey. It's your steps. You own it.
Agreed. So this is a community that obviously they're paying to be in this community, so they are making an investment, which I think is incredibly smart. If you look at, you know, any top leaders in business, if you look at sports figures, the Michael Jordans of the world, the Kobe Bryants, you know, making tremendous investments in their own improvement. So kudos to everybody in this group that's doing that. You know, we have the Outlier Project is all about the fact that we believe anybody can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And you can change it a little bit in that anyone can have an ordinary life, but we all have the power to choose to have an extraordinary life. But the definition of extraordinary is probably different for everybody on this call. For you who's striving for more, what is that definition of an extraordinary life for Brian Covey?
Oh, I love that question. So the way I frame up success, which I think will tie into that, because I view those can be kind of complementary of each other, is I want to be able to do the things I want to do when I want to do them with the people I want to do them with. The things I want to do in my life that bring me joy and passion and excitement. I feel like I'm using my God-given gifts and the things that I've been through. I want to be able to do them when I want. If I just want to get on a plane tomorrow, if I want to go support a friend or go to a ball game or whatever, I want to have that freedom to do it. And the last one, which is the anchor and the most important, I think, is, man, I want to be around great people. Like this community, Scott, you know this. We were talking yesterday. I have really chosen to move some people out of my life during these seasons and move some people in, because I think that for me would be living an extraordinary life that I can bless others. And then I can actually serve out of a place of what I've learned and experiences. And I think that's what we were created to do. So, man, that'd be the extraordinary life that I want to live and be the example there.
Yeah. And what I love is the simplicity, Brian, around that. It sounds like, oh yeah, that's pretty simple. And I might even simplify it even more. And for me, you know, I want to wake up in a good mood. That's really my goal. And then how do I do that? How do I wake up in a good mood every day? And you kind of reverse engineer that. So you had mentioned, you know, you've had a professional sports career, you've had an incredible business career. I think you're just getting started. Do you ever think about legacy, and what do you, if so, what do you want that to be?
That's probably the, I'll call it the $1 billion question, honestly, you know, because I think it's such a big thing on legacy. Where I come back to is, if you've not ever done that and written your eulogy and thought about like, what would those last days be? I think it's a very powerful exercise to think about, you know, what would those closest to you say about you at your funeral and those things. And my family's number one in sharing my faith. I think for those people that meet me, like, I'm a faith-based person. I share that quite openly and honestly. It's changed my life. And my family, you know, I come back to that legacy. But what I would take it a step further, Scott, when I heard legacy at first, I was like, legacy, because that's a great thing. I'm gonna like have this like great reputation when I die. People say good things about me. What I realized is that's not enough. What's the difference I can make in the world with my family? Not just leaving inheritance, money, and those things. But my wife and I, this last year, we got involved, and you guys probably know Nashville, probably like many markets, there is a ton of human trafficking going on. And we got involved in some safe houses and helping to build those, create safe places for kids to go, and starting to get involved in a cause and a mission that matters and that you can make a difference. I think legacy is going to live way past you. And so it's not just the things that I'm very intentional with action about. I'm going to make sure my kids and my grandkids and those down there, like, they're going to have financial resources to do more in the community than I did. They're going to start further down the field than I did. That's the goal. And my hope and my dream would be that they see those things that I and you know, my bride that we were passionate about, and they go make a difference through our church, in our communities. That's where legacy is going to really start to go forward. And I think about, can I put them in a position with their heart, their mind, and the resources to be able to make that impact? Because my parents helped me get further than they did. It's my duty to get my kids further along that journey as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the give back piece of that, because I think we can all be a ring and a ripple that changes the world. I think, you know, that's really the goal for a lot of us, is to inspire one other person that hopefully will then inspire the next person. And that, you know, is sometimes easily done through a community like this. We just, this past month, we gave out bags to people that are currently experiencing homelessness. And, you know, I know that people that posted about that inspired other members of the community to say, oh, wait a second, I can do that too. And, you know, still not certain whether we hit our goal of 500, but we got a lot of involvement, and it was just that ring in the ripple concept, which I absolutely love.
I love that. And, you know, Scott, what I've found, this is encouragement for everyone on the call. You've already taken the step. You're part of the community. You're already investing in yourselves. What I found is I started to surround myself with some people that I never imagined I would be in a room with, to learn what are they doing and to be inspired by them. A lot of the actions I'm taking is someone inspired me. And so I just view it that way. And I always say it's my responsibility now. Who can I inspire to move forward? Because that was probably never their intent, or they never knew they would have inspired someone like myself. But that's such an honor to get to do that. And so be around those type of people.
No, there's no doubt about it. Those people can have a huge impact on your life. You know, we have a new member that's joining us today, Pierre DuPont, and I met Pierre years ago, and we had a wonderful conversation. I remember it to this day. I remember where we were, and not too long after that, I got a beautiful Thanksgiving Day card from Pierre. And it wasn't, you know, Happy Thanksgiving, Pierre DuPont. It was like, there was a lot of handwriting on it, and from the heart. And from that, you know, we've developed a wonderful friendship. And, you know, you never know who you're going to meet and who's going to inspire you. And that was just an example of something that, you know, Pierre, I don't know if you even thought much of it, but that's something that impacted me. And, you know, Pierre's been somebody who I can periodically go back to from time to time and chat with and get inspired by.
You're very kind to say that, Scott. I do remember when we met, and Thanksgiving card and our many discussions since. I just will point out, to your point of that letter, that note, that card, my dad died a couple of years back, and I got all of his stationery, which has his name on it. He was called Pete, not Pierre. But I send these out now as my little handwritten cards. And I cross off the Pete, my Pierre, but it makes it more personal when you reach out to touch someone. So just a thought for you.
That's very cool. Very cool. So Pierre's dad was the governor of Delaware, ran for president in the 80s. And that's a very cool thing to have. But it's funny, that Thanksgiving Day card, which, you know, I don't know, that was whatever, 8-10 years ago. I still have it. So I keep all of those things in a box, and it's cool to think about, you know, those memories that somebody gave you. So it was very, very cool. We've got lots and lots of questions for you, Brian. So I could go on and on, but we're going to open it up for a bunch of members. First, we're going to Florida to, I think he's the best dressed man on the call. Enrique, you are looking good today, my friend. You're up with Brian Covey.
Hey, Brian, good to see you again. And we're going to be chatting later on this year.
That's right.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, in terms of a personal growth, because we know that, there's so many challenges into what we do. But what personal challenge did you have to face and overcome to be where you are today?
So I'm gonna give you two. I think the one for me that I go back and I reference this a lot is when I was 12 and 13, I was pretty overweight, over 200 pounds and like 5'6", 5'7", like shouldn't be that weight. And our basketball coach at the time was also our pediatrician. I remember going in the office with my mom and finding out how unhealthy I was. And our family has in our genes, unfortunately, and it'd be passed on, like high blood pressure and all these things. And that was a pivotal moment for me, is overcoming that and waking up at 5 a.m. every day when I didn't want to and running, and then going in the summers in Memphis when it was super hot and I would run at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And that taught me the discipline in overcoming. Like I could have taken the easy route and stayed overweight and just done that and, had fun and not been committed. That taught me a lot of grit and discipline that to this day is still an anchor for me. And so I think overcoming that, looking back now, having kids and seeing what they go through almost gave me a new appreciation for, I chose to do that. And that was something I didn't really claim for a long time in my life. But now as I look back, no one made me do that. I chose it, and that's who I became. And so I see that pattern repeat a lot. So I love that one. The other I'll tell you is the story I shared earlier about being let go. The person that let me go was a mentor, somebody I looked up to, somebody that in a way I struggled with that belief in myself and overcoming getting fired and telling your wife on a Friday that, hey, honey, I just got fired. I don't know where the next paycheck's coming from. I don't have a next job. I don't know what's going to happen there. And realizing, I think there's 3 responses we have, and they talk about fight or flight. Some people will freeze. And what I learned about myself in that moment is I'm a fighter. Like that's who I am. That's how I'm created. And that kind of takes me back to that athlete. I think for a lot of us, unless you're faced with that adversity, you don't know. And so to this day, that helped me instill belief in myself that I hadn't really had before, and really was a catalyst on my journey. And so that's what I would share, Enrique, is, and those two, man, they made me who I am today. And so I'm grateful for what happened for me, not to me.
Love it. Brian, thank you. We're going to a brand new, I think he's our newest member, Jordan, thanks to David for an introduction from David Ferguson. Jordan is an up and coming entrepreneur who I thought was in Toronto, but I think I've been corrected. I think you're in Florida. So Jordan, you're up with Brian Covey.
Yeah, thank you so much. And hi, Brian. I was in Toronto. I've just moved to Florida. We've become permanent residents here, my wife and I. But my question is more around, personal development. I had a really bad accident in 2016 where I broke my neck diving off of a dock and hitting the bottom of a lake. And then I spent the next year I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And I spent about 5 years of my life overcoming illness. And you talk about I don't know if you could use it tragedy, but like to build resilience. And I like that term. But I've been looking into, just like this group, getting as much personal or self-growth as possible that helps myself and then helps my business, helps my life. How do you validate that something's worth your time? I know that I attend a lot of events, and if there's at least one thing I can pull out, I think it's worth my time. But with so many events now, to be able to attend virtually and in person, how do you validate if something's going to be really worth your time?
Great question. I just want to honor the fact that from 2016 to go through that type of accident, we unfortunately had the opposite of one of our really close friends was diving off a lake in Arkansas and did not make it. So I would say God has you here for a reason. And the fact that you've survived and you are where you are, man, you've got things planned for you. So I just want to affirm that with you. The second, actually, we did this really cool analysis over the last year, and probably during COVID. For many of you, if I were to ask you what's your hourly rate, could you actually quantify it? And for most people, let's be honest, the answer is no, I couldn't. So I'll join the club. And so if you take typically 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, maybe you take off 2 weeks, like to be generous. So 2,000 hours that you actually contribute towards your work and all those things, and then divide that into what your earnings were, you actually come up with an hourly rate. what's fascinating about that is you can make decisions from a point of a standard versus your emotion. And so, Jordan, what I would say is there's twofold to this. One is that formula will help you as basic things like, should I cut my yard myself or should I have someone else do it? What's my time worth? Should I have a courier go do this or do that? Should I hire someone to help edit my videos for social media or should I do it myself? Should I hire an assistant that's going to do, CRM and some of the data tasks of entering things? What's great about this is it removes a lot of that emotion. There'll still be a little, and gives you a number. And if that number, for example, is $50 an hour, let's say, or $100 an hour is your actual hourly rate, and you can hire someone to do it for $25 an hour, the decision for me is easy. I'm hiring that person. I'm going to outsource it. I'm moving on to the thing that I can generate and grow my hourly rate, grow my earnings. What will happen through seasons is things that you might say yes to now, you might not say yes to later. And I'll give you an example of, there are certain conferences that I went to a couple years ago and certain groups that I invested and I went there. Well, I'm at a different place in my journey. And so now investing in different places with that, that's part of the journey. If you're not changing and mixing it up, you're probably not growing. That's something I learned in myself is if I'm doing the same thing over and over and I'm expecting a different result, it's probably not happening, right? That insanity hamster wheel starts to kick in. So find your hourly rate, operate from there. And then secondly, know what you need to be doing in this season that's going to get you that maximum impact. And think of like 3 to 6 month cycles. I wouldn't think beyond that for those type of investments.
Cool. That's really helpful. Thank you.
And as a new entrepreneur, I know when I was a new entrepreneur and I was making absolutely nothing, that could be a tough equation if you use Brian's math. So good luck with that one.
Thank you.
Right?
But it is phenomenal advice. We're going to stay in the state of Florida. Kathy Slayton, you're up with Brian.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Hi, Brian. Nice to see you today. So my question, two-pronged, is what do you think of vision boards and whether you use them or not when you're planning out, like next year going into 2023? And then, if you're really kind of focused on certain things that you want to aim for, or, are you kind of praying about it beforehand and, kind of how does that go for you? I'm just kind of really curious about that because I really appreciate you kind of sharing, your openness of your faith here. Appreciate it.
Cool question, Kathy, by the way. I like that one. So I'm going to take you on a different journey and a different route of it. I've not been one to do vision boards. I've done it once. We had a coach that did it with me. It didn't land for me, but I will say I'm very visual. And what I learned, my dad was a psychologist and a sports psychologist. So as a teenager, what I learned is this, I think is one of the most valuable skills is visualization. And I have become what I would say like very, very competent in it. I'm not an expert or any of those things I say, but I use visualization both. I used it before sports games to actually envision plays that would happen in the series of almost like a movie. I could see what was going to happen and I would visualize myself doing things well in the game. I would also visualize if things didn't go my way, how would I respond? And so what I have started to visualize is things like you're sharing, whether it's a house or a car or something like on vision boards, people put on their vacation spots, all of that. I'm very visual in the sense of I have to see them. So like if I go to a house on the beach and where we vacation down in Alice Beach, I can see that house. I can put my hands on it. I can feel it. Like I know what that's going to feel like. I will visualize myself with my family owning that home. And it puts me in a place of, okay, I'm there and I close my eyes and actually go deep into what's it going to take to get me there. And so then it'll help in my roadmap of if that's what I want to accomplish, how do I get from point A to point B? And I just keep it really simple because I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't have all these like secret tricks, but I know this. There is something between A and B that I need to accomplish or people I need to meet or skills I need to learn that will help me accomplish that goal. Nothing's too big, but I would encourage you today, if you're not using visualization, we did this with a group a couple weeks ago. I think in 5-year type sessions with that in seasons, in 5 years, a lot can be done. And so I am thinking about not just like when I talked about 2023, I'm very focused on that. I also have a very big vision for what it will look like in 5 years. I know where I want to be, what we're going to be doing, all of those things. I would visualize that to where the emotion is attached. And I talk about anchoring a lot. Anchor that in the reason why you want it. Understand what is that motivation and desire, and that will help you through the tough times, because the reality is you're going to face plenty of obstacles on the way to that goal. I don't know if that helps, Kathy, but I use visualization. That's my tool.
Totally. Yep. I get it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Love it. We're going up north to Canada. Wyatt, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, Brian. Great to be able to speak with you. So I heard what you said earlier about just being open-minded, looking for new opportunities, and how many business opportunities have come your way from meeting new people and putting effort in investing into going to conferences and doing all that kind of stuff, and love all that. It's great advice. But for yourself, how have you, and this is kind of piggybacks on Jordan's question, but how have you narrowed down what opportunities to actually go for? Like, I'd imagine you go to all these conferences, you meet all these people, you find out, oh man, this person's made money here, this person's made money here, they're all looking for partners, we all like each other, there's all these opportunities coming my way, and it's foolish to put your eggs in, to just go so many directions. So how have you personally chosen where to go and when?
Ooh, great question. So I'll give you a lesson that out of all of probably the last, I was just talking about this yesterday with somebody, the 7 investments, big investments I've made over the last 2 years, the one that went bad, I had a bad gut feeling about the people. I should have trusted my gut on the people, not the actual product and what we were investing in. If the people are wrong, don't do it. Just don't do it. Walk away from it, even if it's a great return, it looks wonderful. If your intuition is telling you, or you don't have a relationship and you trust those people, don't do the deal. Then you can move into kind of phase 2. If they are the right people and you've got that established trust and you feel like that's someone you'd want to be a partner in, then the second one for me is I'm really simple in the fact that I use the numbers, being a numbers guy for 20 plus years, is I'm looking at now, I'm in a spot where tax deferment is huge, right? So once you get to a place where for a lot of you, no matter what you're making, it could be early on in your entrepreneurial journey, you want to make sure you're not just earning money, it's what you keep. And so I'm looking at investments as a holistic strategy of, I'm a big believer of your primary source of typically most wealth is generated in your primary residence. And then from there, I love real estate and going into deals that just, look, they pencil out, like the math works, you can get financing for those. And then what I would start to learn and get someone that's a tax strategist, not just a CPA, that can meet with you, Wyatt. And that's what I did, is took that next step of what makes sense for me where I am today. Like what should be, and what I was actually amazed with is 3 of the different businesses we're in, I had no idea what they were and would have never found them. You're not going to find them online. Nobody's posting about them. Those deals don't come to you through your DMs, right? They aren't there. You have to be in the room with people. And so I'm starting to share a lot of those on social, because I think it's, the information's not getting to the right people. I wish someone had given this to me 10 years ago, right? Even when I was making, much less money, it's one of those where, man, what if I'd started then? I'd be further than I was now. So I hope that answers, like the people, start there and then move through, have standards of what you want to accomplish. And that holistic view will help you make decisions. And look, I'm turning down deals a lot right now because there's not the capital, or they don't fit, or I don't have the money to invest in it today. That's okay. It's okay to say no.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It'll be a nice driver though, to go, what it drives me to do is go make more money. I mean, you can't invest in them, that, little game I play with myself.
And the money, you see there's lots of opportunities with lots of money, but your point about the people, I'm sure that's a harsh lesson, but one you got to learn to go with your gut with. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Out to California. Tom Doherty, you're up with Brian.
Hey, Brian, thanks for being here. I want to take you back to your professional sports days. When did you have the aha moment it was over?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I'd battled most of my career with being told I couldn't get to the next level. Because those of you, if you check out my career, I was one of the few goalies professionally that's under 6 feet tall. And so I was always told, like, you're not going to play D1, you're not going to play for a top 25 or whatever, you're not going to play pro, all these things. So it's more for me, what I look back on now is I realized I was doing it to kind of prove others wrong. And I still have a love and a passion for the game. I tore my ACL in my freshman year in the conference final. And then I tore my other knee in my ACL. And so as I came back through that rehab, there was a moment where I'd promised my parents I'd finish my degree. And so going back to school, I went back and I started to train again. And Tom, it just wasn't there. I had that like almost intuition of, do I want to go back and do this and pursue it? Or is it time for me to kind of start? And I always envisioned, I had that visualization of, I saw myself getting married, saw myself with kids down the road. And the life I was living on the road, if you follow, especially then professionally, was not glamorous whatsoever, like at all. And I'm like, man, so the desire to have a family and to have kids outweighed my desire to go play. And so I continue to play to this day and have fun. And it just moved to more of a passion than it was, I'm going to go and actually have that, because it is truly a job. Those that have played professional sports will tell you it is straight up a job. And so that's where I kind of knew it's time for me.
That's a great message. I heard it this morning. That's funny, is that, you should discover what your passions are, but more importantly, figure out what your gift is. And clearly you're more focused on your gift than your passion. So.
Oh, love that. Love that. Yeah. And being married 20 years and 3 kids, I would say, that's the blessing. I would rather have that than tell somebody I played 10 or 15 years in the league. That's what I value.
Thank you.
If you want to see a great goalkeeper, go on Brian's Instagram. You'll see Presley, his 15-year-old daughter. She's a beast. So
She's awesome.
It's pretty impressive what she's doing. We're going to Wisconsin. Deb Curtis, you're up.
I am up. Can you hear me fine?
You can.
Hey, Deb.
You can. Well, thank you, Brian. Your answers this whole time has been wonderful. And speaking of worship teams, I'm glad to hear you played bass on the worship team. Do you still play bass on the worship team?
I do. So I don't there anymore after our third child, Henry, when he came along. No more. I came back home and I probably did 15, 20 years of that, and just what a cool experience.
Well, there's a few musicians here with Top. I can mention Chasen. He's a good artist. I've sang on worship teams and in bands. So thank you for sharing your faith. My question to you, my real question, do you have a favorite scripture that you live by and or perhaps quote to others, that maybe need a lift?
Yes. So I do. And I go back to, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'll tell you why. A lot of people just kind of set that aside and generalize it. When we would run the Cooper test in college, it was 2 miles in 12 minutes. And I'll never forget, every year I would be running it and there were people around me, ahead of me and behind me and around me. And I would be saying that scripture as I went through, and it got me through what I say is like to hell and back. Because any of you that know that, I wasn't the fastest runner. That run in and of itself will put you in such a pain cave that's the one that I look back to this day. And then I look at it now being older is, man, look at all the things we talked about today, that without Christ in my life, without that anchor and that faith, man, where would I be? I don't want to know, because I know the teenage version of Brian that had all these issues and all these things. And I'm like, thank goodness, God found me, as I say.
That's right. And it's funny you mentioned you used that scripture when you were in that race. I ran a marathon and I am not a runner. And I must have said that scripture, I don't even know how many times just to finish it. And I did. It wasn't pretty, but I did. But that's a great one. Thank you.
It's huge. I'll tell you this, I'm about to start this journey. One of my kind of mentors and friends in a small group, we're actually going to start going through all the Proverbs for 31 days and just go through that.
Nice.
And yeah, so that's one I'm going to anchor back into.
When you said Cooper test, I saw Kim Brady, I think, had a visceral reaction. So she played soccer at Cal Berkeley, right? And I saw her grimace as soon as you said that. So
that or the beep.
I don't even know what it was, but now I do.
Man.
Oh, don't even bring up the beep test, Brian. My goodness. No.
Right?
The Cooper test is absolutely gut-wrenching, literally gut-wrenching, and the beep test is the same. Yeah, no thanks. Yeah, I'm happy I'm retired.
Listen, I'm a goalie. What do I need to run for? Like, what's the purpose?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Doesn't make any sense. I don't know. Did Joe Jacoby, we got an Olympic gold medalist on here. Joe, did you have to do any of this stuff? You were in a canoe. You were in a kayak.
I'm a terrible person to ask about these things. We didn't have these same tests, but the funny thing, coming from a sport like whitewater canoeing, which had all this unpredictability in the medium, I kind of liked the running tests and the things that had like, or even just lifting weights. Like, you kind of knew what you had to do. With canoeing, it's very hard to sort of, to kind of program that in. And it's just like, what feels good, but it's very hard to kind of bring that to to something very tangible. It's a feeling, but not like lifting weights or the Cooper test. I kind of like that stuff. Sorry.
Sadist. Anyone who has not gotten Joe's new book, Slalom, you're missing out. It's phenomenal. Pick it up, go on Amazon. It's great. Really, really good. We have time for one more question. If somebody else has a question, just jump right on in.
I'd love to hear more, Brian. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your experience with. We hear a lot, for good reason, about the women, Team USA, the women's national soccer team. I don't think I've ever heard too much about men's national team, or like had a chance to hear from people who went through that experience. Love to hear just a few thoughts about that, what that experience was like. And also, I don't know, maybe you could also timestamp it a little bit so we could kind of get a sense for, a lot of us might have known what was happening in the women's game, but like, how did that sort of, match up with what was happening in the women's game at that time with the men's national team?
Oh, man. So I'll give you the very condensed version for time. But I grew up in Memphis. So those of you that follow the women's side, Cindy Parlow is still a great friend of mine. Cindy was one of, I still think, like Brandy. I mean, they were kind of figures. Brandy was at the top of her game. Cindy was with that team a little bit younger. And we grew up, and some of us that were training. And then there were actually 3 more people out of our high school, interesting enough, that went on to play at some point on the national team or had an opportunity with the Olympic team, went on to play professionally. So we had this kind of unique little culture in Memphis. Fast forward to the first time I got invited was actually the U17 national team before the Olympic team. And I went out there and realized very quickly, that was back when Tony Miola and Lexi Lawless and Brad Friedel was out there on the older team. I'm 45, so to kind of put that in context. And I remember looking up like my heroes on there, being very intimidated, very overwhelmed, like, holy crap, what have I got myself into? And realizing the lesson in this was everybody was strong and fast and skilled. The difference truly, like in business and life, there was a mindset difference in maturity between those that I looked up to and what I had. I didn't have it at that age. So it set me on this journey of where I still to this day, learning and growing and understanding mindset and understanding psychology and visualization and all of that. That was what I was missing. And so I got cut from the U17 national team, made it back on the U23, had a chance with U20. So it's kind of a cycle. For those like myself, I never got to actually play in the Olympics. I never got to play and going to like a World Cup. I got to play in a bunch of exhibition games, all these cool training camps and all of that. But what I look back on, what I learned was you can have all the speed and natural talent and ability, but there is something different about the real champions on the field. And it's why I'll share with this group, personal to me, watching the goalkeepers. It's why I would tell you Zach Steffen wasn't picked, in my opinion, to go with the men's team this year, is when Greg Bolhalter looked at that and he saw Matt Turner and he saw Sean Johnson and their mental toughness and what they've demonstrated. You go with the person that not only has the skill and the ability, but also has the mindset to make fewer mistakes and is going to be a team player. That's my personal opinion, right? So I'm just going to kind of share that through there. Watching the U.S. women's the other night, what's interesting is you're seeing the men really start to elevate their game, and we'll see how they do in a week. But the women's game, unfortunately, has slowed down to a point that we need to reevaluate what's happening there, in my opinion, of get that back to a dominant stature. And they have done such great things for like my daughter playing that I'll be forever grateful. But I think our sport has a long way to go. MLS has come a long way. We still have further to go. And I'll be one of those kind of pushing it forward. But that's what I would share. A lot of stuff to it, but that's been the journey and what you learn along the way.
Well, we have covered a ton of ground here. Brian, I cannot thank you enough. Everybody follow Brian, check out his podcast, buy his book. This has been an absolute pleasure. We're going to stay. Anyone that can stay, that wants to stay for a little bit of overtime, we can do that. But Kathy, take us out, please.
This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made.
Brian, thanks again. This has been an absolute treat. Appreciate it, my man.
And thank you, my friend. We got to connect up soon. And thank you for all you're doing and all of you guys. Wonderful questions. And my intention is to add value somewhere in your life today. So we covered a lot of different things. If something resonated, let me know, or questions that we didn't get to. I'm on social. I respond to all my stuff. So let me know. And I'm on the journey with you guys, fighting the good fight.
Awesome. Brian, have a great one.
Thanks, brother.
Talk soon.
See you, Scott.
John Ruggiero, good seeing you, my friend.